Dana, that this is a strategic move by Hamas. They are releasing international citizens as more condemnation comes against Israel by the world for some of the strikes. So they see it appropriate to garner more support for what they're doing and to heap more damage on the Israelis for continuous bombing and the kinds of attack. So the combination of releasing international citizens from Gaza and also the potential for releasing international hostages, non-Israeli hostages, I think is part of the strategic plan by Hamas.
And General, back to what we started with in this program. Yesterday, there was a bombing in Jabalia. That is a bombing that Israel says that they were responsible for in order to kill Hamas terrorists. There was another blast near that region today. We do not know who is responsible for that yet. We want to underscore that at this point. But from your vast military experience and perspective, can you assess this?
Yeah, a little bit, Dana. I'm not a crater analyst, but the first time I saw the pictures of yesterday's bombings and what are reported as today's bombing, it's a singular bomb, a precision device with a very large explosive. And because the crater is so big, it tells me that this is a hardened casing. The Air Force, the Israeli Air Force can deliver what they call blue, BLU bombs that have a hardened casing and an extreme penetrator to get underground before it explodes. So it doesn't explode on the surface like we've seen already with some bombs hitting buildings and then the buildings crashing down. These bombs were meant to go deep. And what you see not only around the crater, but you see some collapsed buildings. And that's not just architectural problems. That's a result of collapsing from the foundation. Well, so it tells me, number one, that evidently Israel had some very good targets in some underground tunnels. They haven't given any information for this. And then to have a second strike when the world is beginning to condemn them tells me that they have some pretty good intelligence of the movement of the terrorists that are underground. So I can understand why the world is upset. There's humanitarian crisis here, but also I can understand why these are being targeted the way they are.
Yeah, and General Hertling, I'm sure you can understand as well that we are being very careful about who was responsible for the second strike today until we know for sure. We believe that it happened. We see that it happened with our own eyes. We don't know who is responsible for that. But going back to one of the things you said, let's just focus on what happened yesterday because we have more information about that, about sort of the crater here and about the tunnels and what it tells you that that this blast was so big and so deep, what it tells you about how deep these tunnels likely are where Hamas was potentially, where the leadership was located, where maybe some of their headquarters are even located.
Yeah, it isn't just the kinds of tunnels we've shown on CNN, Dana, where you see the single file. They also have meeting rooms under there. The Israeli intelligence have had this kind of information since 2014. They went into some of these tunnels in 2021, the last time Israel went into Gaza, and they were amazed at how you basically had an underground city. So there are the passageways. There are also rooms, places where Hamas can store ammunitions that have been built up. And they are about, from all indicators, between 100 to 150 feet underground. So you have to have a pretty large penetrator to get there. And I think after 3 or 4 weeks, based on what they learned in 2014, 2021, and now today with intelligence gathering, Israel knows that these tunnels are extensive. They're moving fighters around under the cities, and they are in areas like this neighborhood and also underneath hospitals that have not just human beings as shield, protective facilities as shields, hospitals, schools, neighborhoods. So all of this is part of the way Hamas fights using that victim doctrine that I've mentioned before.
Yeah, it's so manipulative and so crass. I mean, I kind of can't even think of another word to describe the notion of doing that to your own people. Evil will do it. General, thank you so much for your expertise. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dana.
And with the death toll in Gaza continuing to rise, President Biden and his top national security officials are increasingly facing tough questions about Israel's commitment to minimizing civilian casualties. CNN's Priscilla Alvarez is live at the White House for more. Priscilla, what are you hearing from your sources at the White House about trying to balance the commitment to Israel, the commitment to Israel's democracy and right to exist, versus the criticism that the president is hearing from within his own party in particular about some of the tactics that Israel is using to retaliate against the terror attack in their country?
Dana, it's certainly a delicate balance. And what the last 24 hours have shown is that the Biden administration is walking a tightrope in its support for Israel, because they are both maintaining that Israel is trying to contain casualties while also grappling with the images of destruction coming out of Gaza, which is fueling public outrage. Now, these casualties weigh heavy here at the White House among officials as they ratchet up pressure on Israel to make sure that they are protecting innocent civilians in their fight against Hamas. And these concerns go all the way up to President Biden, who has also discussed this with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as even this weekend in their call, again, saying that Israel has the right to defend itself, but that they also need to make sure that they are protecting innocent civilians at all costs. Now, aides to the president believe that these warnings are best stressed and are most effective in those private conversations that they have with their Israeli counterparts. But the reality here for the White House is that they are facing this public outrage over the destruction in Gaza, the dire humanitarian crisis there, and that all of this risks eroding international support for Israel at a time where they need it. And so all of that is what the president is keenly aware of and what White House officials are monitoring as this continues to unfold. Dana.
And Priscilla, real quick, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is going to go back to the region this week.
That's right. This is his third trip to Israel. According to a spokesperson, he will be meeting with members of the Israeli government. But this will be the first visit after that ground invasion or the expanded ground invasion that we saw in the last several days, and also after this airstrike on that refugee camp. So yet another important meeting for the secretary there in Israel.
Priscilla, thank you so much. Appreciate your reporting. Joining me now for more reporting is CNN's Casey Hunt, PBS's Laura Barone Lopez, and CNN's Natasha Bertrand. Thank you all for being here. I want to start with the president and the fact that, understandably, right after the unbelievable attack that killed in a most brutal of ways more than 1,400 people inside Israel, he was incredibly clear about what Israel could and should do, which is whatever they feel that they need to do. And his rhetoric has changed just a bit in recent times. I want our viewers to listen to some of the differences.
Israel has the right to defend itself and its people. Full stop. Let there be no doubt. The United States has Israel's back. We will make sure the Jewish and democratic state of Israel can defend itself today, tomorrow, as we always have. If you have an opportunity to alleviate the pain, you should do it, period. And if you don't, you're going to lose credibility worldwide. We also have to remember that Hamas does not represent, let me say it again, Hamas does not represent the vast majority of the Palestinian people on the Gaza Strip or anywhere else.
His position has not changed, but the incoming that he has taken has stepped up, particularly from within his own party, Casey.
It has. I mean, and I think that, look, when I was listening to you kind of describe what happened, it was a massacre, right, that Hamas committed against Jewish people, indiscriminately against civilians. And the president, the administration, and I think the world has been clear in saying, at least the Western world has been clear in saying, there is a difference between people who indiscriminately kill civilians on purpose because they're trying to sow terror, and people who are trying to achieve a military objective with military targets that results in civilian casualties. However, it is very clear that the damage in Gaza is wearing on the psyche of the world. It is horrifying to see bodies of children pulled from the rubble. It just is, no matter who you are or where you come from. And it does seem to me that there are a couple things. I mean, there is geopolitical pressure on the president, on the United States, and on Israel to do a little bit more to try and minimize these casualties. But as you point out, there's an increasing challenge from President Biden's left. And he comes out of an old school Democratic Party, right? He's a longstanding relationship with Bibi Netanyahu that goes back years. People forget Bibi went to school here, et cetera.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. One thing I would point out is that not everybody in the Western world said it was okay to criticize these terrorists who went into Israel, including some Democratic members of Congress. There was a resolution that passed overwhelmingly last week, standing with Israel, but also criticizing the notion of terrorism about, beheading babies. And there were a number of Democrats who either voted no or voted present, and you see them on the screen there. And they might be a sort of a small minority within the Democratic Party, but they represent a very vocal group of progressives out in the world in America right now.
And I think that some of those Democrats would say that the reason that they voted no, in part, was because of their very strong criticisms of the Israeli government, not because they don't think that it was a massacre, which some of those Democrats have said that it was a massacre that occurred and condemn the action of Hamas, but that because they are very strongly against the actions of Netanyahu and what they see as his even degradation of Israel's democracy and then his forceful attack now on Gazans and on civilians. But you're right, Dana, which is that the president may not have shifted his position, but he has shifted his rhetoric. And he has started to say more and more, and so have his national security advisors, and so has Secretary Blinken. All of them across the board have started to say more and more that they think that it could be a time for a pause in the fighting. They will not call for a ceasefire at all at this point, but that they think that there should be a pause. John Kirby of the NSC just said that yesterday because they are very aware of the fact that seeing these dead civilians
Danielle, you really pressed him on the specific question of whether or not Israel's conduct amounted to collective punishment. And I haven't seen many, if any, other instances of people who were at one time or currently spokespersons for Israel really being questioned specifically and forced to answer specifically on this question of whether or not any of Israel's actions are disproportionate or themselves violations of international law.
Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, said that he was deeply distressed by Israel's announcement of a siege on the Gaza Strip. He said that the humanitarian situation, quote, will only deteriorate exponentially and that crucial life-saving supplies, including fuel, food, and water, must be allowed into Gaza. So the UN is saying you must do this. You are saying you're not going to do this. How do you?
No, we're not saying that.
He's saying do it. He's saying doing it immediately. What I'm saying is what you're doing.
No.
He's saying doing it immediately.
I got you. I'll tell you exactly what we're saying. I'm saying we will do everything for the Gazan people. Once and now we demand immediate surrender, unconditional surrender of Hamas. If Hamas people come out with their hands up and clear their weapons, believe me, everything will be restored to Gaza. It is Hamas in Hamas hands.
Now I understand. Thank you for clarifying that, sir. I think we're actually on the same page here. You're saying that once Hamas leaves, you'll grant the Gazan people food, shelter, fuel, electricity, hospitals, schooling. And if they don't, and if Hamas doesn't leave, then they'll continue to starve and die in hospitals. You are defining for the international community right now collective punishment. You're saying until Hamas acts differently, the 2 million people in Gaza are going to be treated this way. And once Hamas acts differently, these 2 million people in Gaza will be treated better. That is exactly what collective punishment is. You're holding them accountable for the actions of others. That is the definition, the textbook definition of collective punishment, sir. Now, you may accept that that's what you want to do, but this is absolutely a contravention of international law.
Well, I'll tell you exactly. No, if we pushed them into the wall, we're not pushing them to the wall. We want to open a humanitarian corridor so they can leave. But if Hamas,
So that who
if
can leave?
Hamas-
So that who can leave? Citizens? You're saying civilians can leave, but only through the Rafah border, correct?
at this point, yes.
So they can't
because
come.
where else?
Your country. They can come into Israel.
I'm telling you one more thing I want to say.
No, but I want you to address that point. Don't just smile, sir. Respectfully, you're saying you're making a corridor. They can go to Egypt. You're bombing them. You say you want to save them, but they can't come in.
First of all, I'm not smiling. I'm crying in my heart. I'm crying in my heart for all the butchery of thousands of Israelis. Why do you think the world is with us? Why do you think the world is with us? All the international media was there. So don't talk to me about collective punishment. Don't talk to me about humanitarian. These are new rules of the game. There is no coexistence with Hamas, which is worse than ISIS, and we will not stop. We are allowing the population to leave. But if Hamas will surrender, there won't be any problem whatsoever.
Danny Ayalon, thank you so much for joining me on Upfront.
I was really struck by the news coverage, even the international news coverage. Usually, if I turn to BBC or some of the other outlets, I'll see really intense questions placed at the feet of, Israeli leaders. But after October 7th, it seemed that everyone was handling the matter with kid gloves and not asking those tough questions, particularly the first week. I think now we're starting to see more and more people say, okay, enough, right? I mean, the disproportionate force is so extraordinary and indefensible that it becomes harder and harder to pretend it's not happening. But on October 14th, October 10th, it was very difficult to get those kinds of responses. And I'll be honest with you, I was shocked that he was as forthcoming. It was almost as if he was honest in spite of himself. And I was very happy. Initially, I was trying to get a field general and someone who's actively part of the Israeli army. I know that's the defense force, but like every other country, they have an army that engages in offensive action. And they canceled. And then they said, well, we get someone else. And they canceled. And after a while, it was very clear, as the power was about to be cut off from the hospital, at Shifa Hospital, that they weren't going to give us anybody. But then Danny Ayalon came on, and he served under Netanyahu. So he's a very specific set of experiences. And I was just happy that I had the opportunity to ask those questions. And I got to be honest, when he sort of conceded that they were going to engage in behaviors that were very clearly definitionally collective punishment, I was, as the journalist in me, is like, oh my God, this is great. Like, I can't, you know what I mean? But I was also, I don't know, there's something about hearing people say so fearlessly that we're willing to wipe a population effectively off the map, or depopulate a village, or chase them into Egypt, or whatever the thing might be. Hearing that it was stunning and shocking, and it really made me sad.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this since I spoke to Miko Peled last week, who has written this book, General Sun, talks about how deeply kind of embedded in his own country's mythology he was, as he was being raised by someone in a family where his grandfather signed the Israeli Declaration of Independence, and how little he heard about Palestine, even the word Palestine, how the Palestinian population was referred to as Arabs, the prohibitions against saying or referencing the Nakba, Israeli institutions, educational institutions being denied funding if people do exactly that. All of that has made me reflect on some of the messaging that came out of Israel immediately after October 7th. That, much like your interview, were almost shocking in how straightforward it was about a willingness to, or a desire to, level Gaza into a parking lot, and talking about Palestinians as human animals. And I did wonder if part of what we're seeing is the kind of language that is usually reserved for an in-group, where people are kind of inured to it and almost expect it, that's now coming out on a national stage, and people who are used to only speaking within Israel in these terms are now kind of perhaps even surprised about how some members of the international community, certainly not all, but some members of the international community are reacting to, frankly, the callousness with which these officials are speaking.
I think that's exactly right. I'm currently finishing a film called Black in the Holy Land, And with that film, I've been paying a lot of attention to Knesset members, other members of the Israeli government, as they talk about Ethiopians,
Mm.
the Beit Israel population, even more so as they talk about what they call the infiltrators, what the rest of the world will call refugees, and the asylum seekers, and saying that they're rapists,
Mm.
saying that they're subhuman, saying that they are violent by nature, calling them using the Hebrew word kushi, which is effectively nigger.
Mm.
You hear this stuff and you see this stuff, but it's often, like you said, within the internal discourse, the domestic national level discourse, and it's often in Hebrew. And when I watch Netanyahu, for example, talk about the very same issue of refugees on the international stage, the global stage, it's, oh, we have an issue with infiltration, we have security problems, we're going to do everything we can to relocate these people, repatriate these people, et cetera, et cetera. So he's very careful, just as he has been with two-state solutions and other conversations around the future of Israel-Palestine. He has a very specific register for the national community and another one for the international community. And I think, to your point, many of the other members of the government aren't necessarily in conversation with the global community. And so that sophistication and nuance is there. And at a moment of national panic and rage, there's not even a desire to put on a front. There's not even a desire to pretend that, they're going to move according to international law or with basic humanistic principles, or that they even see Palestinians as human to begin with.
Yeah. I guess Netanyahu, a homegrown Philly boy, knows how to play to the audience.
Yes. Cheltenham, not Philadelphia. I will not allow.
Sorry,
Yes.
I forgot you're also a Philly guy. I don't want
Yes.
to put that on you,
He is
Mark.
a solid mile and a half outside of Philadelphia. It's a big mile. She went to Cheltenham High School.
Okay, but is he rooting for the Phillies and the Eagles right now?
I hope not. He seems much more like a Dallas Cowboys kind of guy.
I heard you bring that up on the Breakfast Club interview, which is another one I really want to. My mother actually said to me before I recorded today, she said, make sure Mark knows how much we appreciate his voice out there and what an amazing job he did in that space in particular, because it's a huge audience of people who might not necessarily be, it's not a news show per se. And so your ability, I think, to break down issues that we have been told for so long are too complex for anyone normal to understand,
Right,
in a
but
way that
especially
was
Black
so
people.
accessible. Yes. And I think they asked you good questions that got to the root of, I think, what a lot of Americans who aren't that plugged in might be wondering, even if they might seem a little, not the question you would get in a left space where people already basically agree, but that's exactly the kind of questions that needed to be asked, and you handled it all
Absolutely.
very beautifully.
Well, thank you.
I do want to get back to this very fascinating interview with the Hamas spokesperson. First of all, how did you get that interview?
I have a very resourceful, well-connected team. That's the best I could say about that.
Okay. So, but it's not the case that they have like a web page that says press contact information.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Osama Hamdan definitely did not have, I didn't go to his URL. But,
Okay.
I'm not convinced that they're unwilling to talk to these other networks. It seems to me that other corporate media outlets have made a decision that they don't want to be in conversation with them. And part of why is because they've decided to frame them as a terrorist network. And when you have Netanyahu and others saying that they're no different than Daesh, that they're no different than ISIS, then it becomes, you wouldn't do an exclusive with ISIS on CNN, so they're not going to do one with Hamas. Again, it's part of a broader project, I think, of framing Hamas not as a government organization, even if you think that what happened on October 7th was an act of terrorism, by framing them as a terrorist organization rather than a government, rather than a democratically elected government and or political party, and it makes it easy to avoid political and diplomatic solutions. And so I think it's less that they're that inaccessible and more that the media wants to frame them like they're in a cave, in some desert, committing acts of terrorism, because it plays into these Orientalist narratives of who they are and who Palestinians, who Arabs more broadly are.
Yeah, you asked him, among other things, what the kind of expected political goals were of the October 7th attack. And given the foreseeable likelihood that Israel was going to respond disproportionately at great cost to Palestinian civilians, what their end goals were and whether he thought it was worth it. And if I recall correctly, he basically answered, well, that's a good question.
Yes. Let's talk about the Israeli response to the Hamas attack, which has been horrific. Israel is bombing Gaza and declared a complete siege. It's cut off food, fuel, and water from being admitted to over 2 million people. Thousands of Palestinians are going to die. One resident.
To be fair, let's pull up this video here. Shout out to Compton J, who has been doing phenomenal work with Revolutionary Blackout Network. Thank you so much for actually getting this video up and ready. So let's play it for all the beautiful people and see it firsthand.
Thank you very much, Chair Murray, Vice Chair Collins, distinguished members of the Appropriations Committee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify before you today.
Populated areas. Stop supporting the genocide and ethnic cleansing of the people of Gaza. Ceasefire now. Save the children of Gaza.
Not shrinking back. Not in the face of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Not in the face of an intensifying strategic competition in the Indo-Pacific and around the world.
If the witness will suspend, and I ask that everyone again respect this hearing, we will suspend until the room is cleared.
As in so much that we do to advance America's national security.
Notice that it's all about money and power and investment, but I just want to pull up this tweet right here. Shout out to Brianna Joy Gray for also retweeting and giving commentary on this, because apparently, as it stands right now, here's what Secretary Antony Blinken shared out. We don't have to choose between defending Israel and aiding Palestinian civilians. We can and must do both. Isn't that fantastic? Now, of course, we do have this. Any member of Congress who cares about Israel's enduring security, or America's for that matter, should support defense and humanitarian assistance to address this conflict. Guess who writes the article? Defending Israel is essential. So is aiding civilians in Gaza. Well, you could call for a ceasefire. I mean, that is something he could do, theoretically. In theory, that is something he could do, because, again, if we just get Brianna Joy Gray's statement right here. It is our duty as Americans to give aid to the children after they are bombed with our financial and political support. Is quite a take. Now, it's not from the article, but it is just it is just something to see firsthand. It's something there. A nice little quote take. Let's return back to the video.
Our defense, our diplomacy, our development must work hand in hand.
Committee will suspend. And again, I appreciate that people feel passionately about these issues. I would ask that you respect our witnesses and our committee members and allow the American people to hear their testimony. We will pause until the room is cleared.
I know that several
Committee will suspend, and I again ask that those in the audience respect the people in the room and allow us to continue the hearing. The hearing will suspend until the disruption is removed.
The President and I have both stressed the need for Israel to operate by the rule.
Committee will suspend.
Why aren't they at the table? Ceasefire now! I said ceasefire now!
So what can we take away from this? Well, the Democrats are going to be in a little bit of a quandary, especially during the 2024 election cycle. They've already burnt bridges amongst the African-American community, but now the Arab and Muslim community and Latino community. And the thing is, as we look at the fact that the Democrats are struggling right now to keep on that mask of neoliberalism, the evidence is a
strike that unfolded today at the Gaza refugee camp. The Israelis say that it killed a top Hamas general. Have you received any intelligence briefings to suggest that actually was the case, that they were able to take out that general?
No, I haven't. And, the loss of life is tragic. A lot of innocent Palestinians are being killed. And the main reason is that Hamas uses their own people as human shields. So if you're Israel, you're in a dilemma here, because to go after their leaders, you're probably going to have to hurt some innocent people. But that's the nature of this war, I'm afraid.
I think that's obviously the big dilemma that Israel faces, that the whole world is really grappling with. What I just want to understand, though, is if this were the United States of America and there was a target that was in a densely populated civilian area, would the United States have taken a strike like that against a refugee camp?
I think a better analogy, what would the United States do to knock Japan out of the war? You got to understand, this is not normal stuff in the Mideast. Hamas wants to kill all the Jews. It's not about the Palestinians. They're not trying to help the Palestinian people. They're trying to destroy Israel. So when we were attacked by Japan, we declared war on Germany. And how did we end the war? We dropped a bomb on several cities in Japan, breaking the will of the Japanese people. If you had asked the average American, what's the proportional response after Pearl Harbor, they would say the only response is victory.
Do you see why a lot of people, especially all these decades after that, would say we have other options here? I mean, this is not a time where our only weapons are dropping nuclear bombs. There's precision weaponry, there's intelligence. We have so much more information.
I don't know why.
So I guess what I'm wondering is, in 2023, when militaries as advanced as Israel's and as the United States have choices, is it acceptable to drop bombs on a densely populated civilian area where there are refugees, where people are living, where there are children?
Well, in 2023, who would imagine that someone who survived the Holocaust in World War II would be killed by Islamic terrorists in Israel later in life? In 2023, could anybody imagine a group of people would come into Israel and slaughter families, rape children in front of the parents, burn babies alive, put a baby in the oven? Can you imagine that? I can't imagine that. Here's what I imagine. The destruction of Hamas is non-negotiable. I hate the loss of innocent lives. The day after Hamas is destroyed, I hope we have a better life for the Palestinian people. But I'm not blaming Israel. I'm blaming Hamas. I'm not blaming Israel at all. I know they're trying to limit civilian casualties, and I know Hamas is trying to increase civilian casualties.
Is there a threshold for you, and do you think there should be one for the United States government, at which the U.S. would say, let's hold off for a second in terms of civilian casualties? Is there a point at which you would start to question?
No, if somebody asked us after World War II, is there a limit what you would do to make sure that Japan and Germany don't conquer the world? Is there any limit what Israel should do to the people who are trying to slaughter the Jews? The answer is no. There is no limit. But here's what you need to do.
Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Straight Outta Politics. I'm your host for today. I'm CJ, that stands for Compton J Online, which is I'm known better online as Compton J or CJ. In real life, just J. We're already starting with over 200 people, so make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that like button. Let's get to 200 likes from the start. Also, a couple of shout outs here. Got my fundraiser that will be scrolling down at the bottom to get some new equipment. And then don't forget, if you're not already a member of Patreon, the best way to support RBN is through our Patreon account. You can get a plan. I think you can create a plan as low as $2 a month if you're interested. Now back to this video. And I mean, I swear Nikki Haley and Lindsey Graham go do these interviews and to see who could be more unhinged. Because I'm going to introduce a video from Nikki Haley, who's talking out of pocket about pro-Palestinian protesters also. So it turns out that all of the protests that you and I, most of the RBN's audience have either participated in or strongly support, is driving the ruling class mad, and they don't know what to do about it. Yesterday, Nick and I reported on the Joe Biden announcing that he's going to start to do some sort of preventative measures to fight against anti-Semitism. And understand, when anybody brings up anti-Semitism, ask them, what does that mean? Because what they're doing in media is they're taking real anti-Semitism, people who hate Jews because they're Jewish all around the world, not just in occupied Palestine. They're mixing that with people who are out protesting against the genocide going on in Palestine. And they're labeling both anti-Semitism. But when they tell examples of anti-Semitism, they only talk about the the actual cases of anti-Semitism, but they're umbrellaing in the protest. Just want to make sure that's clear. Let's get back to this clip with Lindsey Graham. And this is Lindsey Graham going completely just off the rails. Because if you ask the question, I can't remember where I saw it, maybe it was on TikTok, where somebody posed this question that it wasn't an American, but it was a Western ally. I can't remember, it was France or somewhere in Europe. Well, if the tables was turned, let's say Hamas was in a hospital filled with Americans. One Hamas quote unquote terrorist is in a building, a hospital building, let's say Kaiser, a hospital building with roughly 400 people in it. So the United States and Lindsey Graham is trying to tell us that we would be fine with taking at that hospital to get that one Hamas person killing 400 innocent people. You notice when they are posed the question, you notice they refuse to answer the question directly. What they'll do is give a historical example. Well, what happened when we were attacked by Japan? What we have done? What we have said? Well, how many lives is too many? 9/11. They want to give every other example, but this example. So I'm going to rewind it back just a little bit so we can get a little more of his unhinged on this last part here. Let's listen.
Put a baby in the oven. Can you imagine that? I can't imagine that. Here's what I imagine. The destruction of Hamas is non-negotiable. I hate the loss of innocent lives. The day after Hamas is destroyed, I hope we have a better life for the Palestinian people. But I'm not blaming Israel. I'm blaming Hamas. I'm not blaming Israel at all. I know they're trying to limit civilian casualties, and I know Hamas is trying to increase civilian casualties.
Is there a threshold for you, and do you think there should be one for the?
How do you with the straight face say you know they're trying to prevent civilian casualties when this was just last night? So the refugee camp was already struck. And that's what's prompting these questions. So you're telling me, I can't believe this guy is saying this. Let's listen again. But I almost, sometimes when I'm looking at Lindsey Graham, it almost feels like he's saying outlandish shit and he knows he's saying it, almost like he knows that's his role to say it. It sort of reads on his face, or shows on his face, at least to me.
Threshold for you, and do you think there should be one for the United States government, at which the U.S. would say, let's hold off for a second in terms of civilian casualties? Is there a point at which you would start to question?
No, if somebody asked us after World War II, is there a limit what you would do to make?
You see how the example can't be what's happening now, because there's no way to make. You can only say no. But if you start to go into an explanation based on today's events, you would start to sound like a psychopath. This is why they got to answer the question and then give detail about a different event.
Make sure that Japan and Germany don't conquer the world? Is there any limit what Israel should do to the people who are trying to slaughter the Jews? The answer is no. There is no limit. But here's what you need to do. Be smart. Let's try to limit civilian casualties the best we can. Let's put humanitarian aid in areas that protect the innocent. I'm all for that. But
it's funny how they believe in endless slaughter of the other side to preserve Israel, who they see the other side as an existential threat. But on the other side, Palestine and or Hamas, who has the same worldview about Israel, when they have the same worldview, then they're called terrorists. That's bizarre.
This idea that Israel has to apologize for attacking Hamas, who's embedded with their own population, needs to stop. The goal is to destroy Hamas. Hamas is creating these casualties, not Israel.
I don't think anyone's asking, well, some people may be asking Israel to apologize, but that's not what I'm asking about. I think the question here is about how they carry out the war, and there are choices here.
He's feeling very uncomfortable because he knows he's on the wrong side of history here. You get what I'm saying? I wouldn't be feeling all uncomfortable and getting huffy puffy if I felt I was on the righteous side. When your integrity is being questioned, because that's what this is questioning. America's questioning, the world is questioning the United States' integrity. This guy, he doesn't hide it well. He doesn't hide it well that he knows that he's taking an unpopular stance that speaks against humanity and morality. He understands that standing with Israel is standing against humanity and morality. He understands that. And what they're saying, Zionists and Zionist adjacent people are saying, we understand we're gonna take the heat for all of this right now, but our generations coming after is gonna reap the benefits. And we can see that here in the United States. The same sort of thing. Eventually it's gonna be, oh, that was in the past, guys. Now let's just get along and keep this Israel. You see? Let's continue though.
But you mentioned, and the Israelis have described it this way, they want to eradicate Hamas. And I think most people agree.
It's okay for them to say to eradicate Hamas, but it's not okay for Hamas to say they want to eradicate them. Okay.
That is a reasonable goal. However, how long do you think that will take? How long?
I don't know. Here's
is
what I
it
think.
reasonable for that?
I think we are.
He is so bad at hiding. He is so bad at trying to hide emotions that he would want to conceal based on what he's saying. He looks uncomfortable, like he has indigestion. You know what I mean? Like he looks like right here. Watch this. You see this? He looks like constipated. You see these shots? These aren't the faces of a person who feels like they're on the righteous side. Even her face is telling too. Because her face is saying, this guy could have me killed and make it look like it was something legitimate, but I'm forced to be put in a position where I have to ask him these questions because there's millions of people out in the streets protesting. So we have to pretend like we're pushing hard against these politicians. She looks deathly afraid of this guy.
A reasonable goal. However, how long do you think that will take? How long?
I don't know. Here's what I think.
Is it reasonable for that?
I think we ought to be focusing on the day after Hamas is destroyed, as well as destroying them.
He's so indifferent about Palestinian lives. This is why the Democratic Party is going to lose the White House. For sure now that I believe. Before, when I was just looking at the polls before any of this happened, and you guys have seen it, in post-duopoly show we made predictions. I was like, I'm linking at 60-40 Trump. I'm seeing Trump is going to win this. That's before all of this stuff. 60-40. Now I'm looking at 80-20. 80-20, and it's going to be proven out in another segment that I do, maybe a segment or two that I do. One of which is saying I can no longer justify voting for Joe Biden in 2024. So we'll cover that in a bit. But let's get back and listen to a little more of this Lindsey Graham Unhinged.
Do you think that is on the table, that the Israelis are thinking about what happens after Hamas?
So I'm going to have dinner with the Saudis tomorrow night. This occupation.
So you see, this is a dance they're doing. He just changed the subject. In the middle of a question. You understand what just happened? She asked a question and he said, I don't know, and proceeded down a different path. And the dance is, this is how you know it's a dance. How would a journalist be sufficed with an answer? I don't know. What's going on? Would a journalist be satisfied with that? Let's see if she's satisfied. Let's see if she pushed back after he says this. Let's see. Maybe she does.
Occupation of Gaza by Israel will not be long lasting. Israel's not going to go in and occupy Gaza. That's a losing proposition. They're going to go in and dismantle Hamas. And when they've achieved that goal, the world needs to come up with a plan for Gaza and the West Bank to give the Palestinians something to live for.
How do you know when Hamas is
He has such a I don't give a fuck about them attitude. I noticed like when he was just talking briefly about something else, he didn't have this demeanor. Then when he goes back to Palestine,
The world needs to come up with a plan
Look,
for
look how
Gaza
his
and the
head.
West
Look
Bank
how
to
his head
give the
starts to move.
Palestinians something to live
Look at
for.
his.
How do you know?
Like, look at the
Hamas
batting of the eye. Like, he don't give a fuck about the Palestinians. That's a tell. Like, when a person is speaking, notice pivotal words in the sentence. If any sort of, especially in your face, any sort of movement specifically only on that word, that's a tell. Now, I don't know what it's telling. That's you specific to the situation. And in this case, that's a tell, because this is the same sort of like this. He's doing this like this when he's talking about Palestinian lives. That's how he is. That's how his demeanor. What is it about Israel that has these people? I mean, even the lobby, Israel lobby, and it's so funny. We hand them money and then they hand it back to us through lobbying. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? But they got all of these politicians in their pockets. But it seems like Israel is the one lobby where there's a welcome mat for. The other ones, they got to be convinced, you know? But the Israel lobby seems to have a welcome mat at every Senate member and congressional members' door, office in Washington, D.C. Let's continue.
Hamas is dismantled.
When the Israelis tell me it is, because they live next door, I would never ask.
When the Israelis tell you it is.
The Israelis to risk another attack from Hamas. I would never ask the Israeli people to shorten this operation until they believe they're safe. Now, once they believe Hamas is destroyed, then we need to work with the people in the region to give the Palestinians a better life.
So, someone says, when should we say enough is enough with all these murders? And Lindsey Graham says, when Jeffrey Dahmer tells us it's over. That's essentially what Lindsey Graham is saying. Lindsey Graham is telling us that this will be over. The murders and these atrocities is over when Jeffrey Dahmer, aka Israel, tells us it's over. Okay, that sounds like a plan. We pay for this. We pay for all of this nonsense, these shenanigans.
I'm not blaming every Palestinian for what happened. Every Palestinian's not a terrorist. There are Palestinian children caught up in this, and it does break my heart.
You see the blinking of the eyes there? You see how he has a tail when he talks about Palestinians? I don't know when I start picking up on these slight tails in my teenage years, and I was able to read people pretty good. But every time he rounds back to Palestinians, he starts to blink and bat his eyes, like it giving a tail, as if what is coming out of his mouth, he doesn't really believe.
Well, they believe they're safe. Now, once they believe Hamas is destroyed, then we need to work with the people in the region to give the Palestinians a better life. I'm not blaming every Palestinian for what happened. Every Palestinian's not a terrorist. There are Palestinian children caught up in this, and it does break my heart. I'd like to have a future for the Palestinian people that's more hopeful than they have today. Let's destroy Hamas, and that makes it better for the Palestinians and the Israelis.
I mean,
I'm going to stop this and introduce you to the Nikki Haley part of this, because she cooperates in diverting what the conversation is supposed to be about, which is the refugee camp and what the fuck is going on. Isn't that what the title says on the screen for CNN? But Lindsey Graham doesn't want to talk about Palestinian lives the whole segment. We gave it 45 segments, Abby. Let's move on. I pay your salary, or my donors pay your salary. Understand that, Abby. Abby actually puts that out. Let me see if there's before I go to the other video, because I don't want to have to come back to this. Let me just show you a couple of responses to this unhinged nonsense. Yeah. Computer is moving extra slow today, but it's always moving slow. Capacity is reached. That's what it is. Here, no way. This is like what you hear in Russian media about Ukraine. This is Matt Duss. Matt Duss is the former foreign policy advisor to Senator Sanders, and I would say is probably likely an intelligence person, in my opinion. This is like what you hear in Russian media about Ukraine. That's Matt Duss saying that. Can't believe that. This is horrific, but as far as we know, this is also the position of Biden, Sanders, Warren, and every Democrat who opposes a ceasefire and spouts cliches about Israel having a right to defend itself. Do these Democrats have a limit? And if so, what is it? I love for someone to ask this question, and I changed that there. Then Peter Dow, the fake piece of shit, chimes in, so I'm not going to read his, but that is Matt Duss speaking to this. Let's go to the next part of this, which is Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley, am I missing it here? Oh, it's down here. Here it goes. Nikki Haley here. Hers is a lot shorter clip, but she puts out her own clip. I guess she's proud of this. She says, "Publish." Now, Nikki Haley. Let me preface this video a little bit more. Nikki Haley is disgusted with the protests, the pro-Palestinian protests going on in the United States, the tens of thousands of people protesting all across all of the United States. She is very upset, and this is what she put out. Publish every name of the pro-Hamas protesters in our cities and universities. They are siding with terrorists who chant "Death to America." That is unacceptable. She's mad at all of the people who was at the protest, who a lot of the RBN members reported on. I reported on the protest here in LA. So let's listen to Nikki Haley.
And you expect all kinds of ridiculous things at the UN. I fought this battle every day for 2 years. What I don't expect is to see what's happening in our cities and what's happening on our college campuses. Because these protests that we're seeing, are you telling me that these professors, that these college students, they are supporting a terrorist organization that I asked for a vote at the United Nations, and the majority of the countries at the UN, Sean, agreed that Hamas was a terrorist organization. Yet we have Americans protesting, saying that they support an organization that is a terrorist organization that killed 33 Americans, that took almost 20 hostage, that said death to America and continues to say death to America every day. So do these Americans want to see them destroy America? And if they do, every one of them is dangerous to our country. Every single one of them, because that's what Hamas preaches, is death to America. So when they get up there and they hold those signs, or they get upset on why people won't hire them, it's because companies don't want to hire someone who wants to destroy our country. That's why I think every name needs to be notified. I mean, it needs to be published. Every face needs to be published. And we need to call this out for the hate that it is. This is
Let me be very
absolutely
clear, though.
unacceptable in America.
It's unacceptable to have a different view. Did Nikki Haley say this about the Charlottesville Jews will replace it? Did she say that about those people? Get all their names and let's make sure they don't get jobs. Did she say that? But she can find her way to say this part. People who don't want a genocide. She is unhinged. So right now, who's running neck and neck as the most unhinged public political figure? Nikki Haley, Lindsey Graham, and Hillary Clinton. Those are my three. Is there anybody I'm missing? I'll look at the comments now. Let's look at the comments. Anybody I'm missing? We're talking about people who go on these interviews and says some of the most unhinged things. Just covered Hillary Clinton talking about people know the ceasefire. Nikki Haley, I think Nick and I have done at least 3 segments on Nikki Haley in the last 4 months of her having these unhinged segments. But the 3 that I would put in as the most unhinged rhetoric that's out there right now is Nikki Haley, Lindsey Graham, and Hillary Clinton. That might be a good poll to ask here. But I'll do it later. I need to get a producer. But all right, so that's Nikki Haley. Let's look at some of now. She obviously
expect all kinds of ridiculous
she's obviously getting ratio. There's 3,700 comments. She's obviously getting ratio 2,000 retweets. Let's look at some of the reaction. It might be positive. Let's see. Here's Raina. I think that's how you say it. Rainia. Okay. Nazi vibes. Very much Nazi vibes. I also get. And here's Paul, the gay waiter. And that's his name. Nikki Haley is insane. Facts. And here's another Rainia. I think that's how you say it. And I think that's more of a fuller version of the same thing. But always remember when Nikki Haley said, always remember she called for the genocide in Gaza. Always remember that she has Palestinian blood on her hands. Yes. So lots of the same reaction, just unhinged. As Americans, our First Amendment allows us to protest. How much money do you receive from AIPAC? Ban AIPAC. Like, this is just unhinged. And I think I'm going to end that segment there. I guess that's just Aaron, the Unhinged. That's who they call. We can just call them the Unhinged and put Lindsey Graham and Nikki Haley on that graphic. And I'm going to pause it there and read a couple of things. Shout out a couple of announcements here. We had an old target of 200 likes, and I'll tell you where we're at in just a second, and also tell you about some of our other topics here. So let's do all of that. So let me tell you about some of our other topics. So let's throw the graphic on the screen so we can try to get through some of these topics here. First thing, we're at 190 likes. 190 likes. The goal is 200. So we're only 10 away. So let's make a new goal. The new goal, hang on a second here. While I have the graphic up, let me read the topic. So Israel bombs refugee camp. That's one topic, and they've already admitted that, so there's no question in that case. And then the next segment will be, not the next segment, but another segment will be genocide fallout, and it's an article entitled, "I Can No Longer Justify Voting for Joe Biden." So we'll read that article there. We just covered Lindsey Graham, no limits to Palestinian death, so we just covered that. Then we got a short clip of Wolf Blitzer surprised at IDF's cruelty towards Palestinians. So when you get an Apex-funded Zionist like Wolf Blitzer who's surprised at the brutality, that's saying something about your genocide, Israel. We already just covered Nikki Haley calls for the heads of pro-Palestinian protesters. So I kind of meshed those two segments together, so we covered that. And then if time permits, we'll cover the Latin countries show solidarity with Palestinians. So I wanted to read all of those, and I think that's what covers all the people on the graphic. Oh, sorry, except for Anna Kasparian. Also, there's a good clip where she says something that I agree with, and I wanted to play that. So we'll get to that in a little bit here. Actually, let's see. It might be short enough where I can start with that, actually. I think I do want to do that. Where's that? I think I do want to do that. So, and this is where I saw it. I saw it with Misty, of course, because Misty was like, "Wow, I can't believe I'm agreeing with Anna Kasparian, but Misty does, and I do too." So that's what we're gonna cover now. This tweet, and you could see. Did I update those graphics? Yeah. Oh, that's the older ones, but you see the new target is 300. 300, and what you're watching is straight out of politics. We're gonna say Anna. Is it Anna with one M or yeah, one N? Anna Kasparian speaks support for Palestine. Okay, for Palestine. All right, so got it. This will be a short one. I was gonna mix it in with something else, but I think it's good enough to make a short one, short separate one. And we're gonna call it this, Aaron. Let's start here. Anna Kasparian speaks support for Palestine, and I would say probably is a little more than support. And as you can see here, a friend of the show, Comrade Misty, says, "Well, shit. Here I am agreeing with Anna Kasparian. Who would have thunk? Well said." And I just remembered, I sent her a message to see if she wanted to come on. Let me check. Okay, she cannot. Okay, so she can't. All right, and there, I think you can see it too, where you can see where she says she cannot. All right, but at least I have her in spirit and in this text here. I'm sorry, in this tweet. So now let's listen to what she says. She goes on this show, and I guess I'll give it a better preface here. She goes on this show. Watch this woman eat Israel's human shield argument in a minute and 20 seconds. So in a minute and 20 seconds, Anna Kasparian talks about the human shield argument that Israel always puts forward. So let's listen right here.
Let me ask you a very direct question. Do you think Israel wants to kill innocent civilians?
I do.
You think Israel genuinely wants to?
I do.
What evidence do you have of that?
The evidence is they are refusing to do special operations and instead are.
Now, This already hasn't aged well in like 2 days for him. What evidence we have that? How about bombing a refugee camp? How about that? Twice. People like this refuse to believe with all the evidence, and like he knows she doesn't have to say this stuff if he looked at it at all, and maybe he hasn't. Maybe that's what these Zionists do. They just go off what other people say in videos, other made up shit like RFK, and they just run with it, and they just say RFK said it without looking it up themselves so that they can avoid really understanding what's happening here.
Are relying on bombing areas where they know civilians are at, and then they'll turn around and say, well, Hamas is using them as human shields.
So if someone was shooting at you, if someone was, you don't have kids, right?
If an armed man grabbed a family member of yours, do you have kids?
No, I don't.
Oh, do you have, okay, your mother, you talked about your mother. If an armed gunman grabbed your mother, had a gun to her head, okay, and he is confronted by the authorities, by law enforcement, and law enforcement, they just decide, you know what, we're not going to negotiate, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to shoot the hell out of both of them. And then they come to you and say, well, your mother, sorry, was a human shield. Would you accept that argument?
That's not the question, though.
Would you?
How is that not the question? How is that not the question? And the thing is, I think she gives, in their question, she gives Israel more credit than they should have. Because in her example, the person took them specifically hostage, and you're shooting a person while that's not what's happening. They're saying these people over here in their own house, these people over here in the refugee camp is shielding them, and there's no person who from Hamas that's right there. So she's giving them more credit than they deserve. But even with this question, he doesn't have the ability to answer.
And then they come to you and say, well, your mother, sorry, was a human shield. Would you accept that argument?
That's not the question, though.
Would you accept that argument?
You're making up a random story that my mother is held captive.
Hamas using Palestinians as human shields is not a justification to indiscriminately bomb the hell out of that region, knowing full well that the majority of people who are going to end up dying are not Hamas militants who are underground in the tunnels, okay?
That's sort of a mic drop. Because he was almost missing the point. And her example is similar to the example that I have. Like trying to kill one person, killing one of your enemy is not justification for killing 100 people around your enemy. 100 innocent, that's not justification. I'm sorry, however bad you want to get the person, your want to get the person doesn't supersede the lives of the other 100 people. Sorry, it doesn't. And so completely agree with Anna here. Let me gonna rewind it back because he's fumbling in his words after the question because it's a great question that illustrates or tears apart the human shield argument and illustrates it forces the person who would answer the question, and I was trying to figure out a way to say this, forces the person who would answer the question to pick a side of morality. And the reason he's not answering the question, a person who would acknowledge whose answer would be on the wrong side of morality, I'm finding it a hard way of saying it, a person whose answer to her question would be on the wrong side of morality will just attack the question. And that's what he's doing. Oh, that's not even what this is. Because if he were to answer that question, he would be on the wrong side of morality.
As human shields is not a justification to indiscriminately bomb the hell out of that region, knowing full well that the majority of people who are going to end up dying are not Hamas militants who are underground in the tunnels. Okay. It's the innocent civilians who are going to lose their lives.
So,
and that's the point. I mean, I wish somebody would ask Anthony Blinken and ask John Kirby, who give these answers. Like, is that like, give them a question with a number? So, John Kirby, is it the U.S. policy position that it's okay, or they agree that it's okay for Israel to kill 10 Hamas militants in exchange for the 100 innocent Palestinian children that surround them? Is that okay? That's the question. It needs to be put to where the scale of what's happening on the ground is put in front of them and answer that. Because the scale is never answered or never put in front of them. Like, let's take the high estimate. 1,400 is what Israel says was killed. I'm tend to lean what Nick says. I believe that number is inflated, but let's say 1,400. You know how many people was killed? I saw the number 8,000 on the Palestinian side last week. So I know the number's a lot higher. It was before this refugee camp too. So we know the number's a lot higher. How is this? But anyway, kudos to Anna for going on these networks. I don't even know who this is. Apparently this person may be a lot bigger than I am. Maybe he's bigger than Anna. I'm assuming at least at Anna's level. She wouldn't go on the channel and see. So she's going on here and making these points to an audience that may not hear these points. And if he's the host, they're definitely not hearing these points that she's making. I do want to hear this last 40 seconds of this again.
Enforcement. And law enforcement, they just decide, you know what? We're not going to negotiate. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to shoot the hell out of both of them. And then they come to you and say, well, your mother, sorry, was a human shield. Would you accept that argument?
That's not the question, though.
Would you accept that argument?
Because what her example is missing is that it's just the one gunman and the mom. How about one gunman, your mom, all your siblings, your uncle, your aunts, all of their relatives, their kids, all your grandparents? Now, would that be okay to kill all of them for that one so-called terrorist?
Argument.
You're making up a random story that what my mother is held captive.
Hamas using Palestinians as human shields is not a justification to indiscriminately bomb the hell out of that region, knowing full well that the majority of people who are going to end up dying are not Hamas militants who are underground in the tunnels. Okay. It's the innocent civilians who are going to lose their lives.
So again, shout out to Anna for a great pushback, at least in that clip. I haven't watched the entire episode, of course, so I don't know what else is said. But now let's get to one of the main, if not the main story, and that is the Israeli bombing of a refugee camp. And I mean, there's no way for them to. I mean, they're admitting it. So that is the next story here. Let me get this set up here. Genocidal Israel bombs refugee camp. There's no Hamas at the refugee camp. Or at least, actually, let me change that because that's the excuse they're gonna give. So I should actually adjust what I said there. Super chat here. Anna is still vote blue no matter who. She is ultimately supports this. So that is a great, great point. Kudos for the rhetoric, but to your point, Sam, you're right. You voted for this. Voting for the person in power who's part of this, that makes you complicit. That's just a fact. So thank you for that. Anna, this guy is gonna be banana. He is locked in and going circular debate. Let's see here. Yeah, that's all. I was refreshing it, make sure I don't have any more super chats. We're gonna get into this next segment. The goal again is 300 likes. I'll do a quick check before I get back into it. The other thing is I have a fundraiser. Everybody knows about my computer issues. They've been going on, and I don't want to keep belaboring what they are, but that's why we're holding a little fundraiser. You can see it scrolling down there at the bottom there. And we are at 230 people have hit that like button. The goal is 300, so another 70 of you. When you hit that like button, we will hit our target of 300. We've had 775 people come through at some point to watch us, so thank you for dropping by, even if it's for a few minutes. Thank you for that. And we've peaked out at 335. All right, so let's get into this main topic. Again, 300 is the target. But now let's get into our main topic here. Let me check this message here. No. All right. Let's get into our main topic. And Aaron, you can start here. So for those, Zionists and Zionist supporters and Zionist adjacent who say, what do you mean? Israel doesn't target civilians. It's Hamas that's putting them in danger. Well, Israel bombs a refugee camp 2 times. Now, a refugee camp is people that's there that need shelter. They have no other place. They're displaced. That's why they're there at a refugee camp. And apparently, all Israel has to say is there was a Hamas person there and it has them right to destroy this refugee camp. And here is another headline here. Israel's bombing of the Jabalia refugee camp, another atrocity in the genocide in Gaza. So we're going to be reading this article on it and then showing some news coverage of it, some clips of it. But yeah, we're going to get into this article. But let me read a snippet of the article before we go to the full article here. And the snippet reads like this. The massacre of the Jabalia, I think that's Jabalia, refugee camp is a bloody but stark warning that the only way forward is to build a powerful revolutionary movement against imperialism, genocide, and war in the international working class. There is nothing to be negotiated with the Zionist regime or the NATO imperialist governments, which are controlled by a cabal of bankers and generals and run by political criminals. The Israeli government and its NATO imperialist allies have proven impervious to protests, begging them to renounce ethnic cleansing and crimes against humanity. In 30 years of war in the Middle East and Africa since the Stalinist dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, they have plundered Iraq, Somalia, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, and Mali, killing millions. Their response to moral appeals against genocide, as the refugee massacre shows, it only to escalate their acts of mass murder. So they see all of the mass protests going on. And what does Israel say? Even with the pressure from the United States, we're doubling down. It seems against their own strategy to me. It seems so counterproductive to achieving their own, what they say they want to do. But let's bring up the article and we'll close this little pop-up. I already read the headline, but you see it again there. This written not even a day ago from Alex Lantier. And you see some of the wreckage. Yesterday, the Israeli Defense Forces committed a horrific atrocity, killing and wounding hundreds of men, women, and children in a wanton bombing of the Jabalia refugee camp. Photos reveal that a large area of the camp that was once contained many tall buildings had completely collapsed into the rubble. The health ministry of Gaza confirmed it had identified 50 dead and 150 wounded from the strike on the camp, built to house the descendants of Palestinian forced to flee their land during the creation of the state of Israel. The full death toll is likely much higher. Many of the dead were vaporized or torn to unrecognizable shreds by the 6 massive bomb blasts that destroyed the camp. Quote, I went and saw the destruction, homes burned under the rubble, and body parts and martyrs and wounded in huge numbers, end quote. One 41-year-old who helped dig through the rubble told AFP, quote, there's no exaggerating when they talk about hundreds of martyrs and wounded. People are still transporting the remains of children, women, and the elderly, end quote. Israeli officials brazenly defended the bombing, boasting that this act of mass murder targeting a defenseless civilian camp had exterminated many quote-unquote terrorists. IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari said the bombing had, quote, managed to eliminate the terrorist murderer Abraham Bahari, who, end quote, who Hagari claimed was, quote, the main leader of the combat, end quote, against IDF forces in Gaza. During Bahari's elimination, many terrorists were killed, Hagari said. The bombing of the refugee camp is the response of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government and is NATO's imperialist backers to the mass protests by millions of workers and youth around the world, denouncing the IDF's genocidal onslaught against Gaza. And I pause here. So you guys want to have a worldwide protest against Israel? Well, here's a bombing of a civilian refugee camp, killing kids. And understand, Gaza is 50% under 18. So if just by it's logically to deductive reason that it will be similar numbers in the refugee camp. But because they supposedly, no one even knows, we just go off what Israel says for some reason, this particular person was killed, and supposedly he was the leader of something, and terrorists, quote unquote, were killed. That's okay that all these civilians were killed. Is that really what we're saying here? Is that really what the United States is sponsoring? Is that really what our tax dollars are going towards? Their message is, we will ignore your protests and proceed with waging war by the methods of crimes against humanity and genocide. Here's David North. The bombing of the camp, killing and injuring at least 400, is Netanyahu's reply to the worldwide protest demanding an end to the genocidal assault on Gaza. The Israeli regime is acting with the full support, I should say, of the Biden administration and NATO. And then I don't think that's a picture. Yeah, that's a picture. So when I click on it, it will take me to Twitter, which I don't want to do right now. The green light for this atrocity was given the day before by Washington with the active complicity of its European NATO allies. As the confirmed death toll in Gaza passed 8,000, including over 3,000 children, this number I referenced earlier, U.S. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby rejected the overwhelmingly 120 to 14 vote in the UN General Assembly in favor of a ceasefire in Gaza. War and mass killings of civilians, Kirby insisted, had to continue. He said, quote, "We do not believe that a ceasefire is the right answer right now. We believe that a ceasefire right now benefits Hamas. And Hamas is the only one that would gain from that right now. Not the innocent civilians, John Kirby. Innocent civilians wouldn't benefit from a ceasefire." Yesterday, Kirby defended the bombing of the camp, refusing to comment specifically on it. You see how they never comment? They'll give an answer to the question, then they'll use something else to talk about, not the details of what they're answering yes or no to. Quote, "We're not going to react to every event in real time. You know why? Because you can't. You would sound like a psychopath." He said, however, he added that U.S. officials engaged in daily conversations we are having with our counterparts in Israel that keep civilian casualties at a level Washington views as acceptable, meaning they're having conversations in the background, supposedly. Is those conversations working? Apparently not. As you want to hand them $15 billion. Quote, "It's obvious to us that they are trying to minimize civilian losses," Kirby said. In the article, it says Kirby lied. That is a bold-faced lie. How can you even say that it's obvious to you that they're doing that as they bomb a civilian refugee camp? Amazing what these people say. Amazing. Kirby's statement, let me take this here. I'll put the hyperlink to this article in the description. I'm of all the members, I'm probably the worst with putting these receipts. I'll show them on the screen, but I forget to put them in the. But I just put it. I put the article, the link in the description right now, so you can click on it right now, refresh, and click on it, and you can, if you want to follow along. Kirby's statement is an endorsement by the U.S. government and NATO military allies of Israel's genocidal methods in Gaza. While it aims to defend Israeli war crimes against the Palestinians, there are targets of imperialism across the Middle East and around the world. the imperialist powers are putting the world's population and above all the international working class on notice. They view genocide, mass murder, and ethnic cleansing as legitimate tools to crush resistance to their hegemony. Israeli defense minister infamously called the Palestinians human animals at the world's outset, I should say, demonstrating that the IDF's policy was indiscriminate slaughter. It cut off all water, fuel, and food supply to the densely populated region of over 2.3 million people. It massacred hundreds of civilians and health workers by bombing civilian targets like the Baptist Hospital. It also ordered over 1.1 million people in northern Gaza to leave their homes and flee to southern Gaza along roads intensely bombed by the IDF forces. Let's scoot down a little bit in the article here. The Financial Times of London cited a Western diplomat as saying that, quote, the pressure of a continued Israeli assault on Gaza could yet lead to a shift in stance by the Egyptian regime. Apparently, endorsing the Israeli plan, the unnamed diplomat said, that's the only thing that can be done. So now is the time to put the increased pressure on the Egyptians to agree. This poses the question to millions of workers and youth internationally protesting against the war on Gaza. How can the military machine of IDF and NATO be stopped and genocide averted? The massacre of the refugee camp is a bloody, this is what I read earlier, but stark warning that the only way forward is to build a powerful revolutionary movement against imperialism, genocide, and war in the international working class. There is nothing to be negotiated with the Zionist regime or the NATO imperialist governments, which are controlled by a cabal of, by cabal, I say a myself, by cabals of bankers and generals and run by political criminals. The Israeli government and its imperialist allies have proven impervious to I'm going to include our protests, begging them to renounce ethnic cleansing and crimes against humanity. In 30 years of war in the Middle East and Africa since the Stalinist dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, they have plundered Iraq, Somalia, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, and Mali, killing millions. This response to moral appeals against genocide, as the recent refugee massacre shows, is only to escalate their acts of mass murder. The force that can stop the genocide is the working class, which through its labor produces the wealth of society. An international mass movement of strikes and worker struggles can completely block the major economies and bring down the government's complicit in crimes against Gaza. Only a struggle to mobilize and build support among workers and prepare a direct assault on the power of the capitalists and their military intelligence machines can stop the genocidal onslaught against Palestinians. And I'm going to end there. I wanted to make sure I included the solution that this article brings up before I move back to Twitter for some other visual sort of receipts here. Or I should just say other receipts, because maybe they're not all visual. So let's go. Oops. Escape doesn't work. I gotta hit back. So let's go. So I showed you there. Now I'm going back to this because this actually says Israel bombs the Jabalia camp for the second time in 24 hours. So they actually bomb it twice. Okay. Another headline here: Jabalia refugee camp blast. Dozens reported killed in Gaza. Let's continue here. Here's CNN just in. Israel confirms an IDF attack caused the massive blast at Gaza's refugee camp, largest refugee camp, that has reportedly left many people dead and injured. That's corporate media. And then, of course, Elizabeth Warren, who supports Israel. You can't hand a psychopathic murderous killer a bunch of bombs and weapons and then say, be nice. But here's Elizabeth Warren. Horrible. Israel has an obligation to protect civilians under the law of war. Hamas's use of innocent Palestinians as human shield does not excuse bombing a location filled with civilians. Psychopath. People know Israel's a psychopath, but they still are okay with funding this. What does that mean? That you're saying this stuff, but you're okay with funding Israel? I'm going to see what the latest, because there could be something that has been an update just before I close this. Not that one. So it doesn't, could be any updates. Okay, so I am going to play this here just in case. No, not that one. Doesn't look like there's any updates, but I will play a little bit of this to get some of the on the ground. And it says, an Israeli airstrike on the refugee camp in Israel killed and injured hundreds of people on Tuesday, with Israel bombing it again on Wednesday. Nothing on this planet can justify killing civilians, says Gazan aid worker. So this is an aid worker who's on Democracy Now! I wanted him to chime in. We won't listen to the whole thing, but let's hear him chime in here.
Can you talk about the significance of what took place yesterday?
So, yes, proudly, I'm born and raised in Jabalia camp as a refugee, and Jabalia camp is not a place that for us to consider. It's more than a place, and the place where the attack is the center of the Jabalia camp. It's the heart of the camp, and everyone knows that Gaza is one of the most densely populated places on earth. Jabalia camp is the most densely populated.
Let's give
the
it
most densely populated place in Gaza. So, and for people who doesn't.
So Gaza is the most densely populated place on the planet. Within the most densely populated place on the planet, there's a densely populated place within the most densely populated place in the planet. And that's this refugee camp. Do you think Israel did not know that? So when you say Israel doesn't target civilians, really? How is this not a direct target? Not just happenstance. How is this not directly targeting civilians?
Who doesn't know how it's Jabalia camp? It's a block of concrete. Houses are next to each other. And the widest street in Jabalia camp is 0.5 meter. And 90% of the houses are one roof. It's one floor. And it's one of the most crowded places on earth. The attack yesterday, the massive amount of casualties, it was, first of all, the massive bombardment, and also because it's very populated place, and I don't think both, the Israelis really care about that. When they want to target someone, and I'm not sure about these accusations, who they're targeting, or what's going on there, but it's really horrific situation. And if you look to the images, what was going on, it's really horrible.
Can you respond to the Israeli military saying they bombed, they aimed for the alleyways, not the buildings, and that they were going for one of the commanders of Hamas, and that people should have left, that they warned Palestinians to leave northern Gaza and go south?
Let's go ahead and we keep hearing they will warn. Understand that is not good enough. Saying we called a hospital and warned them we're going to bomb them is not a good enough. Now, you warned them. What does that do? You know what I mean? If I warn you that I'm going to go on a murderous rampage, does that mean I can be set free because I warned you? What does that do? Because I warned you, that allows me to commit crimes? Okay. That's a weird way of looking at things. Let's get back to the video.
First of all, if they're pushing people to leave, where people should go. First of all, I was lucky because I have relatives in the south in Khan Yunis. But thousands of people are in the streets or normal schools, and there is no enough place for anyone anymore in the south. And even there is no safe passage for people to move from the north toward the south. People cannot leave their houses without knowing where they are going. And this is one thing. If you live in Jabalia, it means that you can handle your situation and keep up and with handling your needs in Jabalia.
Right. The people at a shelter, because that's what a refugee camp, the people at a shelter who are at a shelter because they have nowhere else to go somewhere. What? The logic that they throw out and we just go with, we have to stop when they go, they got warned. That is not at all an excuse at all.
If you're going to a new place without somewhere to go and even doesn't know where to go, how people will keep up when they are displaced? This is completely illegal, first of all. And you cannot push more than 1 million people to move in a few days. And until now, for example, since few days, even the roads have been cut between. They split Gaza in two parts. How people are going to go from Jabalia in the north or Gaza City towards the south? This is first thing. And the other thing, I think the images and what the amount of casualties can answer what the Israeli forces are saying.
I wanted to play for you a clip of the IDF, Israeli Defense Force spokesperson, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hecht, who appeared on CNN, where he was interviewed by Wolf Blitzer.
But you know that there are a lot of refugees, a lot of innocents.
So we can insert the Wolf Blitzer part of this because they're going to play the actual clip. Now, I could, cut it off here. Oh, let me wait. But since it goes smoothly with what it's saying, and I'm curious to hear what his answer is, I am going to include this part here. So let's go. So Wolf Blitzer supplies at IDF's Cruelty. And that's exactly what he is. Now, understand, Wolf Blitzer is a AIPAC funded or AIPAC backing supporter and a Zionist. Okay? That's who Wolf Blitzer. And if I spell his name wrong, so be it. Now, I think they're going to play the part where he's surprised. And if not, I guess I can just include it in a different part. But I think they're going to play the part where he's surprised. Let's listen.
But you know that there are a lot of refugees, a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children in that refugee camp as well, right?
This is the tragedy of war, Wolf. I mean, as you know, we've been saying for days, move south. Civilians that are not involved with Hamas, please move south.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a little bit more information. You knew there were civilians there. You knew there were refugees, all sorts of refugees, but you decided to still drop a bomb on that refugee camp, attempting to kill the Hamas commander. By the way, was he killed?
I can't confirm yet. There'll be more updated. Yes, we know that.
But can you confirm that civilians are dead? Can you confirm that civilians are dead? This is what the United States knew was coming, and they warned us. Get what you can get done, Israel, before the world come down, because they knew they're committing atrocities. Isn't that a tale that you know that they're committing atrocities? And we're about to send them money to help them prop up the ability to commit these atrocities with no say-so. Let's continue with the wolf.
He was killed. About the civilians there, we're doing everything we can to minimize it.
See if you can respond.
Like,
to
how is that statement true? How is that statement true? Or let me say it this way. How can that statement be true? And as you're killing, I'm sorry, I'll say it this way. How can that statement be true as you're killing people at a refugee camp? Can you see right before you pull the trigger, you can see all those people. It's thousands of Hamas people staying there. Like right before they pull the trigger, they can see that's all these civilians, and you still do it. How is that trying to prevent them? You think giving them a heads up is the best you can do? I guess that's what they're saying. That's the best they can do, is give them a slight heads up. Now, since I have this here, I do want to bring up something else, because they cut away from that. I want to play a little more of that exchange between Wolf and this guy. So let me play just a little more, and we'll go back to the Democracy Now! Video. So this one, and here's Danny Haiphong saying, Israel has lost the public relations front when Wolf Blitzer, looks like I spelled his name right, former AIPAC spokesperson. Oh, he was an AIPAC spokesperson. How the hell is he a journalist on damn CNN? Oh, I read that, but I did not look at that closely. For some reason, I thought it said something like a donor. He was a former AIPAC spokesperson, is questioning the IDF on its cruel and unusual collective punishment of the Palestinian people. So because they didn't play the whole exchange, so let's listen to the whole exchange here on this point, at least.
Yes, I can. We were focused again on our target, a senior commander, Wolf, and we'll be updating you with more data as the hour moves ahead.
But even if that Hamas commander was there amidst all those Palestinian refugees who are in that Jabalia refugee camp, Israel still went ahead and dropped a bomb there, attempting to kill this Hamas commander, knowing that a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children, presumably would be killed. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's not what you're hearing, Wolf. We're focused on this commander, again, who you'll get more data who this man was. Killed many Israelis. We're doing everything we can. It's a very complicated battle space. There could be infrastructure there.
He's saying we need time to develop a cover story, and you will get that fictional, you will get that fantasy story soon, Wolf. He was a very bad man. He killed many, many, many people, and we will make those people up soon and send you the receipts. How you don't know that when you saying that was the main target? Unless it's a made-up story.
There could be tunnels there. We're still looking into it, and we'll give you more data as the hour moves ahead.
Liars.
But you know that there are a lot of refugees, a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children in that refugee camp as well, right?
This is the tragedy of war, Wolf. I mean,
you see how they don't care about their life.
Move south. Civilians that are not involved with Hamas, please move south.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a little bit more information. You knew there were civilians there. You knew there were refugees, all sorts of refugees, but you decided to still drop a bomb on that refugee camp, attempting to kill the Hamas commander. By the way, was he killed?
I can't confirm yet. There'll be more updated. Yes, we know that he was killed. About the civilians there, we're doing everything we can to minimize. I'll say it again. Sadly, they are hiding themselves within civilian population.
Not
and again,
good
we're doing
enough
this
reason.
stage by stage, and we're going to go after every one of these terrorists who was
so
involved in that heinous attack on the 7th of October. Wolf.
You see how he's trying to pivot? Wolf is like,
Lieutenant Colonel, I'm having trouble hearing you, but let me move on. I assume you can still hear me.
I'm having trouble hearing you. This is sometimes you just be like, man, geez, how are these people this devastatingly stupid and terrible? Dan Cohen also says even with Blitzer, a former Apex employee and Jerusalem Post reporter, can't figure out how to defend the slaughter of 400 Palestinians in a single attack. The Hasbara machine is failing, and that's Dan Cohen. He's done a lot of reporting on the ground.
Yes, I can.
Let me stop that. All right, so let's go now back to the Democracy Now! Video. Here.
To minimize the loss of casualties, the loss of civilians. And asking people to leave is not a justification. This is not a justification to use this massive amount of bombardment targeting someone. And even then, they cannot confirm it. And it's really weird how the world is looking to that and how they are trying to justify the killing of civilians. This is unacceptable, how to justify killings of that amount of civilians by saying that you ordered everyone to evacuate. First, people need even
Yeah, that and that's them saying they did enough. They're saying simply giving you a heads up, as if people can pick up and move their entire lives hundreds of miles away or even tens of miles away with no money, no food, no gas. It is absurd. Absurd. I'll let him finish his point here, and then I'll close this part.
This is illegal to push. These people are forced to flee. And also, there is no place that people can go to. And even here in Khan Yunis, people who are displaced, even like me, we are facing tragedy to provide our daily need, like water and bread. And it's everything is challenging here because there is not enough space in the south to host all these hundreds of thousands of people who fled from Gaza and the north. People who decided to stay there, they don't have any other solution. They don't have any other options. And there is nothing on this planet can justify killing civilians.
And, I am 100% with and agree with what he's saying. Like this, none of what you're saying justifies these killings. It just doesn't. And you thinking they do is bizarre. It's bizarre. And I felt that in the interview when he was, it almost felt like he was like, it feels bizarre that I'm having to explain this. Like, this is crazy what's happening here. But I think it'll be my last receipt. Just wanted to make sure there was no other news update is mostly what I was looking for, not just regular people commenting. So let's get to the next topic then. Israel bombs. That's yesterday. That's the day we did. Oh wow. Oh wow. So our other main story is right here. And I'll bring up the headline. This is the other main story that we will be covering. And this is the Nation. Oh shit. God, what? All right, hold on a second, guys. Everybody. The Nation is the Nation the one where I'm ad blocked or something like that? It's a new month. I wonder if it allows me. We're gonna find out if this is gonna ad block me again. Last time this happened, I think Zoya sent me something. I think Zoya sent me a link where I can website where I can go around these ad blocks. Okay, so it looks like it's going. I'm not ad blocked, so I just needed to double check that before we get to where I need to go. All right, so let's pull the headline back up, and this is from The Nation. This headline. I can no longer justify voting for Joe Biden. That's not good news to hear a headline like that. And it's coming from The Nation. And I think, let me make sure I don't have any super chats before I begin this next segment. So I'm going to refresh my screen to see if I can see any super chats. And then we'll get into this article here. It's really looking like, actually, let me save it for the segment. I was just about to give an opinion on something. I'll save it for the second. Now, the goal earlier was 300 likes, which we have hit. We're currently at 307 likes. 307 likes is where we're currently at. So thank you for getting us to the target. The new target is 375, or we can do 400. We can do 400. We've had over 1,000 people here, so 307. We're gonna go with 400. Somebody's delivering DoorDash to the neighbor. 400 is the new target. That's less than 100 away. We've had over, or just about 1,000 people come through here. 978 to be exact. So that's plenty. That's less. So 400 is less than the amount of people that have been here to watch. So that's should be an easily achievable target. 400 is the goal. Is there any other announcements here? I don't think there's any other announcements. There's no new super chats. So let's get into this article. And let's just get into the article. I won't say that. I'll save that after we've gotten started. But I will preface it this way, and you can start here, Aaron. Genocidal fallout, and this article comes to us from The Nation, and the headline reads, "I can no longer justify voting for Joe Biden in 2024." And Nick and I, since all of this has happened, this recent escalation with the Palestinian conflict with Israel, Nick and I have been saying how this is going to adversely, or I'm sorry, we have been saying that it feels like the establishment had no idea that there were so many pro-Palestinian people, free Palestinian people. It feels like they had no idea about that. It feels like they're shocked about the protests in the United States and worldwide, or maybe they're shocked at the intensity and the frequency of it. Maybe that's what they're shocked about. But let's get into this Nation article. I do have a little snippet, so let's read a little snippet of it before I bring up the full article. And here's a snippet. He has worked hard to provide support, and they're talking about Joe Biden as he. Joe Biden has worked hard to provide support to Israel by denying the extent of the terror and to suppress knowledge of the war crimes he sanctioned. He deployed his Secretary of State to entreat Qatar to stop Al Jazeera's journalists from bearing witness to Gaza's convulsions, and he has sought to extinguish the memory of the dead by casting doubt on the number of lives lost, the number of people Israel has killed. And so I wonder, what sense is there in an argument that the values of a lesser evil when the evil is still so evil? How can I possibly vote for a president that actively sanctions a genocide that provides support to Israel as it destroys a people? That simple answer is I cannot. And I read it that way instead of I can't, because I think I cannot is more descriptive for what we're talking about, or for descriptive for the emotion for what we're saying. Here is the full article that we're going to jump in right now. And The Nation, I can no longer justify voting for Joe Biden in 2024. The subtitle, for years, Ahmed Moore rationalized, and I guess that's the person who wrote this article, rationalized voting for Democrats as the lesser of two evil. Now, Biden's unequivocal support for Israeli war crimes has destroyed that argument for him. And that's them almost embracing, as if they're almost like a romantic embrace, as close as a romantic embrace. That's a better way of saying it. But let's continue. It may not be obvious, but Arab Americans have never felt naturally at home in the Democratic Party. I suspect that our experience tracks with that of other minority groups who've experienced marginalization and racism here in the United States. at least since the Clinton presidency, the party's agenda has exhibited centrist status quo tendencies. And for us, the status quo has been a source of harm on ossified state of indifference. I'm sorry. I am the type that look up words that are pivotal, and it feels like I can't just go past this. Let me see. Ossified. Having turned into boned or bony tissue. Okay, so now let's get back to this. Actually, let's read the other definition. I know you can't see that. Let me read the other definition. Having become rigid or fixed in attitude or position. That's probably the one that we're going to use here in this article. Let me reread now that I know what it is. And for us, and I'm starting here, and for us, the status quo has been a source of harm, an ossified state of indifference to our needs and calls for injustice. A rigid state, immovable, stubborn. So now I understand that. You see why you should look up definitions of words when you're reading? I first had serious doubts about Joe Biden when I learned he self-identified as a Zionist. For me, as a Palestinian American, and for the millions of Palestinians living through apartheid, Zionism isn't a way of seeing the world. It's a political theory that establishes Jewish dominance over the people and land of Palestine, Israel, based on a Jewish majority in that land. It seeks to justify unsuccessfully repeated bouts of ethnic cleansing, occupation, and inequality before the law. By identifying himself with Zionism, Biden expressly indicates his support for the outcome of these policies. A Jewish majority state for Jews only. Implicitly, he endorsed the policies themselves. So, if you're brand new to the station, if you're new to our coverage on this, or if you're new to just electoral politics, there's a huge Arab American presence in Michigan, a huge swing state that the Democrats need to win. And they cannot win with that huge demographic of Arab Americans not coming out to vote for them. They can't win Michigan. So this is not turning out well for Joe Biden. Now, I'm going to blow this up a little bit more just to make it a little bit more for me to read. Let's go. Like many in the coalition of progressive minorities that drive the success of the Democratic Party, I arrived at an uneasy accommodation with myself. The moral challenge many of us face in voting for the Democrats isn't new. The Iraq war, which was supported by most of the party's leadership, made it difficult for it to vote for Hillary Clinton. The conventional argument admonishing progressives to vote for the Democrats is you have an obligation to help the poor, fight inequality, and work for climate justice, racial justice, reproductive rights, and basic democracy. There is only one party in Washington willing to make a contribution to your goal. Therefore, despite Democrats' limitation, which include excessive corporatism and institutional affinity for Israel and neoliberal foreign policy, and a unwillingness or inability to tax the wealthy, you should vote for the Democrats. You see how much you got to give up to vote for the Democrats? Look how much shit he listed here. Excessive corporatism, institutional affinity for Israel, a neoliberal foreign policy, and willingness or inability to tax the wealthy. You're trading all of that to vote for the Democrat for marginal shit. Just doesn't seem like a good payoff. Call it maturity or pragmatism born out of experience, but over the years, I've learned to suppress my deep discomfort with the party's non-progressive policies to vote for Democrats and keep a lesser evil at bay. In 2021, after voting for Jill Stein in 2 presidential elections, I relented and joined up. Here in Philadelphia, I ran for and won a seat as a committee person in my ward. In that capacity, I worked to turn out voters for John Fetterman. I voted for Joe Biden. I have no intentions of doing so again next year. So the Democratic Party, by supporting this genocidal Israel, is losing support to keep them in power in their own country. And for whatever reason, they believe that's a good trade-off. I guess this is really going to be a test of progressives. Are you going to stand your ground in solidarity with Palestinians, or are you going to end up folding to the propaganda and the Trump derangement syndrome narrative that will be heavily pushed the closer we get to the election? But let's continue even still. Hang on one second. I'm waiting for this pop-up to go away. There we. Oh, all right. The past 3 weeks have transformed me. I viewed shocking, nauseating videos documenting the genocide underway in Gaza. I've seen the neighborhoods I grew up in eliminated totally. I cannot describe the pain of viewing my extended family suffer through state-sanctioned terror. I cannot describe the horror they're experiencing, their awareness of their dehumanization, and the agonizing knowledge that they've been abandoned by the cynical world. Now, with Gaza in total darkness, literal and metaphorical, I find that I dread the worst. I am justified in expecting it. I continue. And so my focus turns to the lesser evil. Since the current state of atrocities began to unfold, President Biden has worked overtime to deliver 14 billion, is 14 point something billion to be exact, in armament to Israel. He has deployed 2 warships in the Mediterranean, a menacing specter for Palestinians, even as their homes are being destroyed, as entire families are being buried in mass graves. His ambassador to the United States has rejected calls for a ceasefire and vetoed a resolution calling for one. He has worked hard to provide support to Israel by denying the extent of the terror and to suppress knowledge of the war crimes he sanctioned. He deployed his Secretary of State to Qatar to stop Al Jazeera journalists from bearing witness to Gaza's convulsions, and he has sought to extinguish the memory of the dead by casting doubt on the number of lives lost, the number of people Israel killed. And so I wonder, what sense is there in an argument that values a lesser evil, like you saying lesser of 2 evils? What sense is there to value the lesser evil when the evil is still so great? Like, so he's saying it's not that much less. That provides support to Israel. I'm sorry, that's so great. How can I possibly vote for a president that actively sanctions a genocide that provides support to Israel as it destroys a people? The answer is simple. I can't. My choice is not without its consequences. I live in a contested state, one that Biden barely won in 2020. What are the implications of withholding my vote? Will Trump win the presidency? How does that help Palestine and Palestinians? And by withholding my vote, am I not hurting the poor and immigrants? Am I not contributing to the institutional decay, the end of the democracy itself? Each of us struggle with some versions of this ethical challenge embedded within the act of casting an imperfect vote. It's not with me, because I don't cast imperfect votes. Individually, as people with diverse interests and different views on what a world worth fighting for looks like, what a world worth living in could be, we compromise, we argue, and we struggle to do the right thing, to push for the right thing. That's our responsibility in a democracy. Our activism can't not end on the day after the first Tuesday in November of an election. Yet, despite the awareness of compromise, a necessary feature of democracy, each of us defines an ethical limit. Each of us defines an ethical limit to our participation, and I'm going to add this part, to our participation in that vote blue, no matter who, is what he's saying. There is a limit at a point in which we say, I refuse. For me, that point is now. It is a line in the sand drawn through the Gaza Strip where the anguish cries of innocent people serve as a pitiful dire for the dead. It is a line in the sand marking the lightless graves of 3,457 children. Supporting Israel, supporting a genocide, supporting an occupation has its consequences that Joe Biden is seeing. We don't live in the same world of 1947 where there was no internet. There was no international solidarity that can be seen, visibly seen, because we can share peer-to-peer and go around the gatekeepers. We have internet now. We can see there's other people that feel the same way we do about this, and we can see it in the protests that have materialized. Don't let Trump derangement stop you from withholding your vote over this issue, because this is an issue you should not be voting for the people who are funding this. You are complicit if you support this in 2024. So you are caught between losing democracy or supporting a genocide. And I will lose a democracy any day over supporting a genocide, because the genocide, those people never coming back. You can start another country anytime. You can start up a new country. That's my final words on that article. Let me see if I had anything else to share on that. Might have another receipt or two on the topic. We're rounding. I think I have one more segment before we go. I've got that one, and the ones with this little face is the only ones I'm covering. That's how I know they're for today. This is today's topic. I covered Unhinged, Lindsey Graham. I covered No More Joe. That's what I'm covering now. Oh, Latin Solidarity is the next one I'm going to cover. And yeah, I do have some other headlines to show you. So I do have some other receipts. And this one is from Nick. Actually, let me show Nick first before There needs to be a regime change in order to implement democracy in the United States, because this is a MSNBC poll. All voters, should the U.S. call for a ceasefire? All voters, 66%. Democrats, 80%. Republicans and independents are very similar, 57 and 56. But look at Democrats, and you see why Joe Biden has a problem. You see why Joe Biden has a problem. Every time I go from these tabs. Let's continue. So that's that receipt. And then there's this headline: Biden's big problem with the left on Israel. And it was shown in that 80% of Democrats saying they think there should be a ceasefire. The president has seen a backlash from young and progressive voters over the war as the issue heats up on college campuses. And I'll read a little snippet from this article. The administration's recent shift in rhetoric shows how they are trying to handle the blowback they have received from progressive and young voters. While Biden continues to voice unequivocal support for Israel, he has urged Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to accelerate aid to Gaza and emphasize that Israel needs to protect civilians in Gaza as the Palestinian death toll continues to rise. The war has led to the death of 14 Israelis and more than 8,000 Palestinians, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. But the administration has still not gone as far as some on the left have advocated for. National Security spokesman John Kirby reiterated Monday that the White House does not support a ceasefire, saying that it would only benefit Hamas. Really? It wouldn't benefit all the dead civilians? The Biden administration, seeking to avoid a widening conflict, believes that any wavering in U.S. support for Israel could further destabilize the region. Let's continue with another receipt. This headline here: why the war in the Middle East is politically risky for Biden. This is not looking good for Biden. Several of these headlines, just Google it. Several headlines. I picked three recent ones. But when I Googled it 2 days ago, when we covered another segment similar, it was at least 12 articles that I saw, some even corporate. There's also a snippet from here. This one is from The Hill. This loss of support from members of his own party reflect the fact that sympathy for the Palestinians is greater among self-identified Democrats than is support for Israelis, meaning there's more Democrats who support self-identified Democrats support. There's more support in the Palestinian corners than there is for Israel. Once a reliably pro-Israel group, a March 2023 Gallup survey found that after a decade in which Democrats have shown increasingly affinity towards the Palestinian, their sympathies in the Middle East now lie more with Palestinians than Israelis, 49 to 38. That's an 11% gap outside of any margin of error. So this is where Joe Biden has come into a bit of a dilemma. And I don't see how he's going to get out of it. I really don't see how he's going to fix this issue where his neoliberal foreign policy decisions to team up with Israel and support them will harm him here domestically within his own party. So we're not even talking general election. So if he had a primary, he would not win right now. So let's start talking about a primary again. Or why aren't we talking about a primary again? I'm talking about with some real serious candidates. I don't mean Marianne Williamson. Okay? That's not what I'm talking about. But yeah. I think I am going to stop it there. Yeah. And we got another segment to cover. This is a shorter segment. I covered that. And remember, you're watching Straight Outta Politics. I do want to show you a couple of things before I get into this other subject. And I do want to scroll through my feed to see if there's any stuff that I'm missing. Make sure you check out our website. Not enough of you are going to our website to make sure you're keeping abreast of RBN, keeping invested in RBN. Doesn't mean necessarily money. Now, when you click this over here on our website, you can see many different things, our latest clip, our mission, some of the things we do, some of our summits, our chapters. But this right here, RBN merchandise, when you click RBN merchandise, our bonfire store opens up, and this is where you can see our merch. Our merch has 11 designs. Those 11 designs you can get on mugs, as you see there, or tote bags. Tote bags come in a couple of different colors, or you can get them on shirts, on tank tops, on hoodies. Here goes one of our more popular one. NATO is a terrorist organization. When I click on the hoodie, if you scroll over the image, you can get a close-up of the image just so you can see, but it says NATO is a terrorist organization. And then you can also test out the other colors that are possible on here. Say, for instance, you wanted powder blue, you got there, or the yellow. I keep saying the yellow is the one I'm going to get. Whenever I get the money to buy one, that's the one I'm going to get. But you can see all of that on our website. Make sure you check out our website for our merch and anything else RBN you can check out. So let's move to our, I believe it's our final story, but let me see if it is. Got that one, got that one, got that one. That's the one I need to do. Got that one. Blinking on the Fence. I'm not sure if I got that one. Did I? Blinking on the Fence. All right. Latin Solidarity. And we're going to move to this topic. Make sure you hit that like button. What was our goal? I think our goal was 400 likes. Let me check and see what our likes are now. Oops. Let's refresh, everybody. All right, so we are at 372 likes. We are getting very close. That's 28 more people hit that like button. 28 more people hit that like button, and we are there at our target of 400. 1,171 people have come through to watch the stream at some point. I say thank you to all those people. We've peaked out at about 350 people watching concurrently. So let's get into this next story. Let me see. Is this the first headline I want to start with? Let me make sure this is the first headline I want to start with, everybody. Right here. Or is the other one bigger? The other one is not bigger. So Bolivia, actually, let's preface this a little bit better. And let's set this up a little bit better for Latin countries show solidarity to Palestine. So, Aaron, You can start here. Latin countries show solidarity to the Palestinian struggle, and you can see the headline on the screen there. Bolivia becomes first country to sever ties with Israel over war with Hamas. And you love to see it. Now, they're the only ones who have officially severed ties, but other Latin countries have shown their solidarity other ways by expelling their ambassadors and so on and so on. I'm gonna bring up a Reuters article. Oops. I'm gonna bring up this Reuters article. Oops. Okay, there we go. Let's now share this Reuters article here. This Reuters article, just a brief snippet to kind of give you background on it, and then I have a brief video to show you. So here is the Reuters article. And it says, Bolivia severed ties with Israel's. Others recall envoys over Gaza. This was just written late yesterday evening. And then we're going to watch a short video from Al Jazeera on the topic. So let's get into this article. And I'm just delaying here for my screen. I know you could see it, but my screen. Okay, there it goes. Now it finally shows up on my end where I can read this. All right, so too many items open here. This is written by Daniel Ramos. Bolivia said on Tuesday it has broken diplomatic ties with Israel because of this attack on the Gaza Strip, while neighbors Colombia and Chile recalled their ambassadors to the Middle East countries for consultation. The three South American nations lambasted Israel's attack on Gaza and condemned the deaths of Palestinian citizens. Bolivia decided to break diplomatic relations with the Israeli state in repudiation and condemnation of the aggressive and disproportionate Israeli military offensive taking place in the Gaza Strip. Deputy Foreign Minister Freddie Mamani, I think that's how you say it, Mamani, said at a press conference the three countries called for a ceasefire, with Bolivia and Chile pushing for the passage of humanitarian aid in the zone and accusing Israel of violating international law. Colombian President Gustavo Petro called the attacks a massacre of the Palestinian people in a post on the social media network X, formerly known as Twitter. Israel's foreign ministry did not immediately respond to a request for comment. And that's the brief article that I wanted to read to give you a little bit of context. And now let's go to the short video. The video is also short. That talks about this. And again, this is from Al Jazeera. It's a 2-minute clip on the topic. Let's listen. Oh, actually, let me rewind it a little bit.
Committing crimes against humanity in Gaza. Bolivia cut ties with Israel in 2009 after its attacks on the Gaza Strip, only restoring.
1 second, everybody. Let me rewind it.
Bolivia's government says it's breaking diplomatic ties with Israel, accusing it of committing crimes against humanity in Gaza. Bolivia cut ties with Israel in 2009 after its attacks on the Gaza Strip, only restoring them in 2020. Bolivia says it condemns the aggressive and disproportionate Israeli military offensive. Manuel Rapalo is following developments from Mexico City.
The government of Bolivia has officially severed ties with the state of Israel. We are treating this as a developing story because following that announcement by the Bolivian government, there were also statements made by other South American countries that they would be taking diplomatic actions of their own. Countries like Chile and Colombia, who have announced that they would be recalling their ambassadors to Israel. Now, the decision by Bolivia is a direct response to alleged human rights violations and alleged war crimes by Israeli defense forces in the Gaza Strip. I want to read you just a portion of the statement that was issued by the Bolivian government on Thursday afternoon, which reads, quote, "We demand an end to the attacks on the Gaza Strip, which have so far claimed thousands of civilian lives and caused the forced displacement of Palestinians." This is not the first time historically that Bolivia has severed ties with Israel. This was done in 2009 by former Bolivian President Evo Morales in response to Israel's invasion of the Gaza Strip. But again, to the point of this being a developing story, answering that question of whether or not we can expect other regional leaders to also take diplomatic actions of their own. Colombian President Gustavo Petro took to Twitter announcing he would be recalling his ambassador. Chile's President Gabriel Boric announced on the social media platform X that he would be recalling his ambassador, referring to the bombardment of Gaza as, quote, collective punishment. Now, it is quite late here in Mexico City, but it is reasonable to expect that other regional leaders will make their positions heard. We should be expecting more statements from leaders around Latin America, probably more so in the daylight hours. Manuel Rapalo, Al Jazeera, Mexico City.
Yeah. Let me see here. Yeah, I think that's enough. I think that's enough. I'll now show, go back to another headline here. Just kind of seal the deal on this story. This is from the Cradle. Close. Okay. Latin American nations start cutting ties with Israel over Gaza genocide. And I'll blow this up a little bit. Oh, wow, it didn't continue. And I'll read, the government of Bolivia announced late on the 31st that it was cutting relations with Israel in repudiation and condemnation of the campaign of genocide unfolding inside the Gaza Strip. I believe. And here is Kashakshan News. Bolivia becomes the first country in America to formally break relations with Israel in a period since the operation in the past. So let me play this.
Estamos remitiendo esta comunicación oficial al Estado.
And this is the official reading of the declaration here. So oops. Let me play it.
Estamos remitiendo
we are sending
esta comunicación,
the official communication to the state of Israel, to which, as stated, we make known our decision to polarize nations of Bolivia to break diplomatic relations with Israel. We also demand an end to the attacks in the Gaza Strip, with which so far caused thousands of civilian deaths and the forced displacement of Palestinians. We will send humanitarian aid to those affected in the Gaza Strip who are going through a serious health crisis that threatens the lives of thousands of people. Something she said earlier. Let me make sure I got it right. Hang on a second. Okay, back to where I was. So hang on a second. I'm trying to see if I got something right she said earlier. the plurinational state of Bolivia. Okay, I guess that's just how they call themselves. Okay, so I was just wondering if it was a word that I just was not familiar with. But let's continue with the article. It's a brief article. Let's bring it back to the article from the video. And continue here. Bolivia initially downgraded ties with Israel in 2009 over war crimes committed in Gaza. Their relations further strained in 2014 over the same reason, with former President Evo Morales declaring Israel a terrorist state. Following the U.S.-backed coup in 2019, La Paz restored relationships with Israel. You see how that works? A U.S.-backed coup, then you install somebody who will normalize Israel instead of Evo Morales declaring Israel a terrorist state. Neighbors Colombia and Chile are also recalled their ambassadors to Israel for a consultation on Wednesday, condemning Israel's ethnic cleansing campaign in Gaza and calling for an immediate ceasefire. Similarly, Chilean President Gabriel Boric accused Israel of unacceptable violations of international humanitarian law and of implementing a policy of collective punishment of the people of Gaza. Chile has the largest Palestinian community outside of the Arab world. I had no idea of that. Several other Latin American leaders have expressed their repudiation of Israel's action. And I think I will leave it there. I'm going to put the link to this article in the description if you would like to go read it in full, because I only read parts of it for the segment. So if you would like to go read it in full, please do. I put it in the description there. Is this Twitter? Is it right? I did not. All right. So let's see what else I have here before I head on out. For those that have been watching at the end of the show, most times I've been just scrolling through my feed to make sure, because I go live when a lot of breaking news happens. So just to make sure I'm not missing anything that has happened. That goes Vijay Prasad. He's going to be at the Palestinian pro-Palestinian event on November 4th for Answer Coalition. That's what he's saying there. And then this is Blinken funding genocide. This is him being protested. That's the protest video. So we covered that yesterday. There goes Sabby Sab talking about Amy Schumer, and Amy Schumer is talking about her cousin. There goes Ajamu. That goes Rome shouting out the Boston Clinic. All right, so it doesn't look like any breaking news. An all-timer here. Doesn't look like any breaking news that I'm missing. All right, but I don't, there's no breaking news that I'm missing. All right. So then let's go ahead and begin to set up here. I'm gonna read any super chats or begin to wind down. I said set up, begin to wind down, but I'm gonna set up my outgoing message or video that I'm going to play here. I'm going to leave again with Malcolm X talking about the Palestinian struggle, but and I don't see any new super chats, so no new super chats need to be read. Make sure you hit that like button on your way out if you've already about to check out. And then a couple of announcements. Make sure you join our Substack. Let's get that change. Make sure you join our Substack, and our Substack is right here. If you get on our Substack, then you get notifications sent right to your emails when we go live and when we drop clips. So you'll get one email with all the clips in one email. Then you get a separate email for any live stream we do if you join our Substack. Also, our website here, I already showed you our merch store earlier before the segment started. And you can find that on our website there. The best way to support us is through our Patreon. So if you're able to support our Patreon, here is our Patreon link scrolling there at the bottom. It's very simple, patreon.com/Rev Black Network. Rev Black Network. And you'll find us many different tiers. There's a tier for each member, and you can also create your own tier. And then last but not least, I have launched the fundraiser to upgrade my equipment. All of the problems I have now have been identified that it's my old laptop and not my internet. The internet now works fine, but it has a limit, and the limit is my laptop, the glitches and the things that still go wrong. It is an old laptop, so it is what it is. But if you're able to contribute, here is the fundraiser and the GoFundMe to donate if you're able to contribute. CJ fundraiser for equipment upgrade. And we're also going to be doing a future fundraiser coming up where we need to get some on-the-ground journalism equipment so we can be on the ground for these Palestinian protests, because this is not going to be ending anytime soon. But that's forthcoming and not now. So that is all of the announcements I have for today. I don't see any new super chat, so I'm going to be signing off, leaving you with this Malcolm X video. Hit that like button on your way out, and stay tuned. Tomorrow, Thursday, should be the JB and Sabby show, and you might get a special Nick and CJ show tomorrow. We'll see what Nick says, but here is that video with Malcolm X.
Palestinian struggle is not just a cry for justice. It's a blistering battle for the most fundamental human rights that every living soul on this planet should inherit by birthright. It's an unyielding resistance against the oppressive, suffocating grip of occupation and the callous denial of the most basic human dignity. Just as the civil rights movement in the United States fought against the chains of racial discrimination, so too do the Palestinian people strive to shatter the chains of occupation and tyranny. Never forget, my friends, that the Palestinians, much like African Americans in the United States, have been subjected to a heart-wrenching history of suffering and torment. The birth of Israel in 1948 brought forth the mass expulsion and dispossession of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their ancestral homes and land. This is a historic injustice that continues to haunt the lives of Palestinians to this very day. The situation in Palestine serves as a brutal reminder of the consequences of colonialism and the ruthless dispossession of indigenous peoples. It is an agonizing reminder that the fight for justice knows no borders, and we must stand united in solidarity with all oppressed peoples, whether they reside in the United States, South Africa, or anywhere around the world. Let's be unequivocally clear. Advocating for the rights of the Palestinian people is not synonymous with denying the rights and security of the Jewish people. The fight for justice in Palestine is not an assault on any particular group, but an unwavering stand against the policies of a Zionist state that has for far too long stripped Palestinians of their rights. We must remember that numerous Jewish voices also resound in the calls for justice and peace in Palestine, and their voices must not be silenced. In our relentless pursuit of justice for the Palestinian people, we must also acknowledge that it is in the best interest of the entire world to seek a just and enduring solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It is a pursuit in the name of peace, stability, and the dignity of all mankind. But let me underscore this. The battle for justice in Palestine is not merely a political struggle, it's an elemental moral battle. It's the fight for the most basic human rights of a people who have suffered these injustices for far too long. It's the fight for the right to exist in peace and security, free from the ceaseless specter of violence and dispossession.